recording.
And Shmuley is Shmuley, but he's not bad, even for a Mancunian. All right, so let's begin. We're going to take off from where we left off, which is the issue of the pork versus the people. Okay, what should you eat? Pig flesh or human flesh in order to save your life? Now, the human flesh was not obtained by you in any illegal way. Simply there on sale in the supermarket, okay? 45 shekels for half a kilo of human flesh and however much for a half a kilo of pork. Now, you need to choose one of them to save your life. Which one should you choose? Okay. So, Jack, I am going to ask you to begin. I hope that you don't mind.
Okay.
Rabbi Glasner, give us the whole
Rabbi
title.
Glasner now proceeds to his case study. A patient is informed by his physician that his life will be in danger unless he eats pork or alternatively legally obtained human flesh.
I emphasize legally obtained. No killing here. It's just there waiting for you on the supermarket shelf. What meat
should he choose? The human flesh, since unlike pork, which is clearly the subject of a biblical prohibition, human meat carries no such prohibition.
So we talked about that last week, and just very briefly, there's no clear prohibition on eating human flesh. As long as you don't kill anyone, but you happen to come across it, then there'd be no prohibition, according to almost all of the Rishonim. Okay? One of the reasons is that you can consume human milk, and the rule is in laws of dietary matters that whatever comes from a kosher entity is itself kosher. So I'm turning it around and saying that if human milk is kosher, then the human being must be kosher as well. Okay? Talked a little about bees. Honey apparently doesn't come from the bee; it comes from the pollen, and it is processed on the side of the bee. Only one authority thinks that there is some kind of prohibition on eating human flesh, and that's only because the Torah says, Zot hachaya asher tochelu, these are the animals you should eat, as if to say you should not eat any others. That, of course, is an argument from silence and is always much weaker. So we do, in fact, in Israel, we have a bank of human milk, an underground bank of human milk. Magen David Adom in Rehovot. So in Ramla. So there you are, okay? It's definitely kosher. So what should you choose? Now, Rabbi Glasner rejects this position out of hand and makes the following comment. Now, this is very unusual for a very frum Haredi Posek, okay, great-grandson of the Khatam Sofer, should say anything like this. And I will now, out of deference to Jack, I will read, okay, Jack?
Okay,
line 10, line 11. Now, say we are faced with a dangerously ill person whose life will be lost unless he eats either expressly forbidden animal products or human flesh. How would it occur to anyone that we, the chosen people, would choose the human flesh solely in order to avoid a Torah prohibition, whilst knowing full well that eating such flesh is absolutely forbidden under universal human law, and that whoever does so is considered as if he was beyond the pale of the human race? What worse thing is there to do than eat the flesh of a human being, even that of a corpse, especially that of a corpse in this context? We don't eat our own kind, even if they are dead. Now, according to Rabbi Glasner, Harvey, can you give us a couple of lines, please? 17.
Sure.
Unmute.
I have done so. According to Rabbi Glasner?
Glasner, very good.
Okay. The truly observant Jew must prefer the prohibitions of universal rational law, the norms of enlightened society, over those of the Torah, and avoid finding him or herself beyond the pale of what is considered to be basic human mores.
Mores. In other
Mores.
words, the standards we hold each other to, We respect the dead. We bury the dead. We do things to respect people after they have left their mortal, shuffled their mortal coil. They're no longer alive. It's a basic thing all over humankind and throughout history. To eat human flesh seems to be so shocking that Rabbi Glasner says there may be an Isur Midoraita on eating pork, but I feel that in this case, it should take second place to preserving human dignity. He doesn't use the phrase kavod habriot, but he uses the idea of something that is so reprehensible to most human beings in the world, except for the deviants who may be cannibals, that we should definitely, as the chosen people, as observant Jews, not stoop to that level. So, Bernie, line 20.
The next case study involves a direct clash between universal morality and explicit halachic prohibitions at the biblical level. And in this case, too, universal moral opprobrium overrides.
Opprobrium means heavy criticism.
Putting
very heavy.
Yeah, thumbs down.
Overrides.
Where are we?
We're the last word on line 21.
Overrides, the moral opprobrium overrides halachic norms.
There we are.
Quote,
wow. So what's his second case?
According to the Torah, it is forbidden for a man to wear a woman's garment.
Torah says twice, lo yilbash gever keli isha. No question, this is a midoraita isur, a biblical prohibition.
There's no biblical prohibition on appearing naked in a public place.
So, in any list of Taryag mitzvot, does it say anywhere you shall not appear naked in a public place? I mean a mitzvah, a defined mitzvah, Taryag mitzvah. Does it say from the Shulchan Aruch, lo yitartel adam bashuk? No man shall appear totally naked in a public place. Does it say so? The answer is
there is nevertheless a fixed law amongst
the answer
all.
is no, but Bernie is running ahead.
Is that ahead of us?
There is nevertheless a fixed law.
There is nevertheless a fixed law amongst all possessed of reason. That this is a wrongful deed.
In other words, all possessed of reason is reasonable people. Doesn't say Jews, doesn't say those who know their Shulchan Aruch. Any human being who is possessed of reason, according to Rabbi Glasner, will understand that you should not be parading naked in a public place. It offends basic human dignity. Our clothing gives us dignity. We want to deprive people of their dignity, we strip them of their clothing. The first step in any deep dehumanization is to make people appear in public naked. So, let's see. The next person I see on my screen has become...
Would it be prohibited to go to clothing-free beach?
Would it be prohibited to go to a what?
Nudist beach.
Interesting. Everybody there is naked, right?
Right.
And you could say, well, it doesn't say anywhere in the Shulchan Aruch that you cannot go to a place where it is.
Well, they won't allow you on the beach unless you take your clothes off.
Exactly. So if there's no halachic isur, then the question is, why not? And according to Rabbi Glasner, who will say, of course, it is a terrible thing to do. It's terrible because you'd feel that you were deprived of your dignity, or those looking at you would be shocked and their dignity would be damaged. But if it's a place where everybody agrees and nobody feels that they have been deprived of their dignity, why not? Now, of course, I could come along and say, Jack, question is, why do you want to go to
I don't want to go. I'm just asking.
I wasn't saying you. I was just saying, okay, I'll change that. Why would one want to go? So it could be that you want to go because you absolutely believe this is the right way to take your beach excursion. And this is to, and everybody else around you feels the same thing. And there's no sense of shame. No sense of shame, then there's no affront to human dignity. But might you be, let's use a French word, a voyeur, who's disguising his lust for seeing the opposite sex undressed by calling himself a nudist and going to the beach.
But
Then I
Altif
suggest that if you are Tyler, the rabbi might say, don't go. Do you get me, Jack?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so it's a little delicate, but if you are a committed, convinced nudist, and there is no question of impugning the dignity of the people who are on the same beach as you, I would say, why not? But Rabbi Glasner's talking about regular society. I could, of course, also bring an argument about Chukat HaGoy. I say this is a sort of ideology that non-Jews have. If you like, it's Goyish Nachas to go to a nudist beach, whereas it's not quite what we would have accepted as a Jewish practice. Perhaps we should not be so keen to take off our clothes. So that's another point. Okay, that's another point to make. Is it Chukat HaGoy? And according to a famous Tuvah, the Maharik,
I'll get up again soon and I have to speak the case.
we have somebody talking. Would be nice if they were muted. Thank you. According to the Maharik, Chukat HaGoy is linked to something related to immorality, in particular promiscuity in the sexual arena. So again, I might say that perhaps your regular Orthodox balabos should not be going to a nudist beach. On the other hand, as I said, there could be the exceptional case of the finest Orthodox Jew around who is absolutely ideologically committed and thinks that this is the thing to do. And perhaps, yes, so I don't know. Next time you have that problem, ask your qualified Orthodox rabbi as to what you should be doing. Okay. There is nevertheless, thank you, Marcel, a fixed law. Shmuley.
There is nevertheless a fixed law amongst all possessed of reason that this is a wrongful deed. Indeed, immediately after their sin, both Adam and Chava felt greatly degraded by the fact that they were naked and were walking about like beasts of the field.
Now, that is, of course, a little quotation from the Midrash, but Jack, it does point up that we have an idea, we have a story, it's Agadah, it's not in the Shulchan Aruch, but we know the word used is Vayitboshashu, that Adam and Eve definitely felt shame at being naked, even if it was only to be seen by God. So if that sense of shame is there, then Rabbi Glasner would say, Jewishly speaking, don't do it, okay? Shmuley.
They proceeded, therefore, to make for themselves belts of fig leaves in order to cover up their naked flesh. Now consider the following case. Someone
Slowly,
awakes.
okay? Just a second. Can somebody who is talking please mute? Okay.
Someone awakes from his sleep in naked condition and discovers that the house he is sleeping in is on fire. He realizes that the only way of saving his life is to run out into the street, and the only covering available to him is a woman's garment.
Now, we're not going to go into why, what, or where here. It's just, and this is, as I said, in a very yeshivish work on Masechet Chulin, okay? And this is a theoretical discussion. So, let's see. Marcel, would you give us a few lines? Line 32. Unmute.
What course of action should he take under Jewish law? Should he run out naked in order to avoid breaking a biblical prohibition, or should he put on the garment? In my view, the answer is clear. Parading naked in public is a worse offense than breaking the biblical prohibition. Donning female apparel, since it is an offense accepted as such by all rational people, and anyone who commits it is no longer in the category of those who are created in the image of God.
Now, though Rabbi Glasner talks about Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, and the shame, and the making of Kotnot Or, okay?
Wouldn't a real tzaddik stay in the house and burn to death and say, this is a Kiddush Hashem, that I wasn't over an Avera and I didn't run out naked?
No, you run out naked. Because it's not a surah.
Exactly. Not asur. I'm going to put this a little differently to you, Shmuli. The Baal Chovot Halavavot has an interesting discussion on Shmuel Hanavi. God told Shmuel to anoint David. After he anointed Shaul, he said, okay, go and anoint David. And what did Shmuel say to God? Do you remember?
No, I wasn't alive.
You wasn't there. You weren't there. Okay. What? Anybody know what did Shmuel say to God?
They will kill me, stone me.
Exactly. They'll kill me. What do you mean? Shaul is alive. He's bad enough. He's jealous enough as it is. I should go and anoint David. He'll chop my head off. So what does God say to Shmuel? Announce that there's a family Rosh Chodesh celebration in Bethlehem. Go there under the cover of joining the family and secretly take your oil, anointing oil, and anoint the next king of Israel. Ki ma'asti b'Shaul. I'm not going to go into the whole story of why Shaul is rejected. Baal Chovot HaLevavot says exactly what you said, Shmuli. Why didn't Shmuel say, God commanded me, I'm going to go. So what if Shaul chops off my head? I'll die in the name of God. Correct? No, says Baal Chovot HaLevavot. He says, no. The Jewish way is not to put yourself in danger if you can avoid it. God doesn't want us to be silly martyrs. He wants us to be intelligent martyrs. He's given us rules and regulations. And he says, Pikuach Nefesh overrides everything. Okay? But the question here is not Pikuach Nefesh as such. It's, I'm going to leave the flat. No question. I'm not going to burn to death. But should I put on the woman's garment or not? That's the only question. Okay? Now, if appearing, and now there is a biblical prohibition. Lo yilbash gever kili isha. Would that apply in every situation? In this type of situation, you could leave and appear naked. The only question is, okay, shall you do so? It would make most sense. If you want to be 100% halachic, no problem. You go out wearing nothing, okay? You can use your hands to cover any private parts, and out you go, okay? And you don't put on the woman's garment. The chidush in Rabbi Glasner is that you do put on the female garment, because you take into account the fact that there is something called the dignity of human beings, which is universally recognized, and that should override a biblical prohibition, which flies in face of everything we learned from the Gemara in Brachot. Okay? Ein chokhmah, ein etzah, ve'en tvuna, neged Hashem. So now that he's gotten that far, let's have a look. Robert, I think you're on. Let's get down to Shatnez, our original sugya, line 5. Robert Vassal, can you take us away? Unmute.
Yeah. Okay.
In relation
to the biblical prohibition of wearing a mixture of wool and linen,
Shatnez, Rabbi
yes,
Glasner,
Rabbi Glasner recommends following universal rational morality, even in the face of a definitive Talmudic ruling.
in other words, even if the garment in your room, when the fire alarm has gone off, is made of shatnez, put the shatnez on and leave as a respectable human, following basic human laws of what it is to be in the image of God. The Talmud,
Brachot 19 discusses a case in which someone discovers that he is wearing a forbidden mixture in the middle of a public thoroughfare. The ruling in this case is that a person concerned must remove the garments containing the mixed kinds there and then, and his or her loss of dignity is of no consequence. Support for this conclusion is provided by a biblical verse. There is no wisdom, understanding, or counsel before the Lord.
En chokhmah, ein etzav, en tvuna keneged Hashem, from Mishlei, as we learn. The general principle in Jewish law
governing the balance between human dignity and halachic norms is that human dignity is not considered to be an overriding factor in relation to a biblical prohibition.
That's the halachic position. It only takes precedence.
It only takes precedence over a rabbinic one. The wearing of a garment containing shatnez is biblically prohibited. Hence, Rabbi Glasner's recommendation to wear it flies in the face of a specific Talmudic ruling.
In other words, Glasner is absolutely out on a limb here. Total minority for a posek of his stature to come and say that universal morality, what we believe, makes human life worthwhile at a very basic level, nakedness and cannibalism. It overrides a mitzvah lo taseh min haTorah. Nobody else would dare say that. Midrabanan, of course, we had the Ramah, we had many cases where a rabbinic prohibition is overridden by kavod habriot. And Glasner doesn't mention kavod habriot. His phrase right through his Dor Revi'i is nomos, which means universal. It's Greek for universal human ethics and morality.
Why is wearing shatnez more stringent than wearing women's clothes?
It's on the same level.
Same level.
Same level. They're both asur min haTorah. They're both repeated twice. One for an azhara and one for the onesh. Okay, but no difference, except that when you mention shatnez, immediately think of the Gemara in Brachot. You say, "Wow." But that's against the Gemara and the conclusion of the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch and of all the poskim throughout the ages. So we have quite a revolutionary theory here. Yael Berman, are you around? Not yet. Okay. So let's go to whoever else.
Yeah, I'm around. I'm around.
Line 17. Nicely, loudly, and clearly, please.
Wait, no, I have to get to the share screen. Okay, line 17. In principle, the same applies to the case involving the wearing of a woman's garment. Since this is a biblical prohibition, it ought to override the preservation of human dignity. Rabbi Glasner's recommendation to put on the female clothing and ignore the biblical prohibition is once again in direct contravention of the halakha.
Contravention means against. So it is certainly, I've looked many years, I've been reading Tshuvot and halachic works, and I've always been looking for something that says perhaps what almost all human beings will consider to be improper, immoral conduct, or some conduct that is beyond what is right for human beings, should be taken into account by the halakha. And in all my years, and I've accrued quite a few, this is the only really from source. I'm just going to use a very sort of a Prost way of describing this. A really from source that says, yes, you can. And I call this natural law. In other words, in secular philosophy, there is an idea that if something is so abhorrent to all reasonable human beings all over the world, it should be included in all legal systems. And if it's not, there's something wrong with that legal system. Natural law, or in Latin, lex naturalis. And this is the only case in the whole of halakhic literature, the only text I found that seems to say that that might be right. In other words, there is room to consider, taking into account, again, at a very basic level. We're not talking about feminism or egalitarianism or gender bending. We're talking of democracy. We're talking about things that all societies all over the world have this idea of respect for the dead, not to eat them, and also to be clothed. Basic form of human dignity. So what I'd say here is that although the only source I've found is the Dor Revi'i, and I'm happy if anybody else would find a different source, I think that it does speak, I think it speaks to two things. One, Rabbi Glasner is extremely courageous to have actually written this down. The wisdom in rabbinic circles, which I was told many, many years ago in England, in Gateshead, was that you don't need to say everything you think. And you certainly, but you don't need to print everything you think, okay? But you can say it to a select few, but don't put it into print. And Rabbi Glasner put this into print. And so many people I showed this to on the Haredi sector said he must have been drunk when he wrote this, or he must have been overcome with Yael. That sounds like, thank you. Okay, my granddaughter. He must have been dreaming. He must have lost it. Okay, they cannot believe that he would actually have written these words, but they are here, and I can share the Hebrew original with you. Just that this is taken from an English article I wrote, so it was easier to put in. But the second thing I've said when I've got this reply to Chevroners and such like is, but in practice, if you saw the Rosh Hashiva's wife walking in Rehov Rabbi Akiva in Bnei Brak, and you know she's wearing shatnez, would you go up to her and pull it off? And then, of course, no answer. No answer. How dare you? Chutzpahdik, okay, disgraceful. But what I think is that, in fact, we do this. We would not, and I don't know whether Shmuley you were trying to get at that, but in real life, we do respect these basic universal norms, even if they're not written anywhere in the Shulchan Aruch, or if they're hinted at as powerful ideas in Agadah, in the story part of the Tanakh. They mightn't have a formal halachic anchor, but we do adhere to that idea. There are certain things we would not do, even if in theory we learn them and they're in the Gemara and they're in the Poskim, and we would say till we're blue in the face, no, you may never override a biblical prohibition for the sake of human dignity. The truth is that we would. Okay? So that's why I think this is the most fascinating source.
Agreed.
Now, could we have a little bit here from Ranon line 21, Rabbi Glasner.
Rabbi Glasner does not cite the principle of Kavod HaBriot as the basis for any of his solutions to the hypotheticals he raises.
But he knows that Kavod HaBriot doesn't apply to an Isur Midoraita, okay, a biblical prohibition.
But the idea clearly revolves around the issue of preserving human dignity, not parading naked in public and not engaging in cannibalism, and elevating it to a level of meta-halachic principle, even when flying in the face of a biblical prohibition.
So I'm calling this a meta-halachic principle, things we would really not do because the whole halachic system would speak against it in spirit, okay? But nevertheless, we are, as Orthodox halachic Jews, not usually given to celebrating meta-halakha, above halakha. We're usually very concerned with the nitty-gritty and what it says in the Shulchan Aruch and the various commentators. So let me just enrich this a little bit. Ranon, please, line 25. Rabbi Glasner's emphasis.
Rabbi Glasner's emphasis on the need to avoid universal moral opprobrium, even at the cost of a biblical prohibition, is one of the very rare instances, perhaps the only one, found in traditional rabbinic literature in which there is a hint of a natural law doctrine in the halakha.
In other words, what is natural, what is rational to all human beings should have a role in halakha. The only other concept
coming close to this to this idea is Ratzon Hashem, God's will, which is used by Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg to provide a basis for a principled rejection of cannibalism and non-therapeutic abortion.
Okay, we'll stop there. So, what we do have, and is less controversial, is Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg. We are in Switzerland again, at least after World War II when he lived in Montreux. The Sridei deals with this issue of cannibalism when he's dealing with non-therapeutic abortion, okay? Now, Rabbi Weinberg in the 1950s, and we have yet to wait a while before we get to the 20th century and we talk about the Sridei, but in the 1950s, he was asked by an English doctor, Orthodox doctor, what to do about the fact that the National Health Organization in Britain had ordered all physicians to recommend and to perform an abortion on any woman who had contracted rubella, okay, what we call in Hebrew ademet rubella, German measles in the first 3 months of pregnancy. You may know that in the first 3 months of pregnancy, German measles is very dangerous. Yael, are you there? My Yael? Okay. I was looking for a medical input here, but it is...
If I'm not mistaken, it can cause deafness.
It can cause deafness, and can it cause any other birth defects?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember, but I can check up. I know the deafness is one of the main ones.
Correct. So it can do other things too, but deep and profound deafness that often carries with it a measure of a lack of cognitive ability, cognitive impairment, and in general, Down syndrome. So it's something to be avoided, okay? Now, Rabbi Weinberg is asked by the Orthodox doctor in England in 1951, as a member of the medical profession in England, this is a new directive by the National Health Service. Is he required to recommend abortion in a case of such a medical threat? And Rabbi Weinberg goes through all the sources on abortion, and his conclusion, which is again rather unusual, is that according to halakha, there's no clear Isur prohibition on killing a fetus. Certainly not min haTorah. So he says, but it has to be Asur. It is not possible that we would have no prohibition on killing a fetus at all. So what he says is that killing a fetus is wrong because Ratzon Hashem, God's will, cannot be that we would destroy any form of life unless there was a very good reason. So we know from the Mishnah that if the fetus is threatening the life of the mother, then you kill the fetus to save the mother's life. That's a clear-cut Mishnah, and there is no question. But what happens if there's no direct threat to the life of the mother? Say it's saving her from deafness. Is that sufficient to justify aborting a fetus? So Rabbi Weinberg will actually come to the conclusion that in this particular case, we have a general heter, permission, as we will learn when we get to this whole issue in the 20th century Responsa. You can carry out an abortion, preferably before 3 months, if the mother has contracted rubella early in the pregnancy to save her from any of the threats posed by the continuation of the pregnancy.
So can I just ask?
Yeah.
Is it the mother we're trying to save, or the Uber, or the Vlad?
We're killing the Uber, so we're not trying to say the Uber
No,
one little bit.
Well, so are you saying the mother can become deaf through the rubella in the? I mean, what's the chashash? Who's going to be the deaf one, the mother or the baby?
Sorry.
The baby.
No.
The baby can
Mother.
also become blind. The baby can
The
also
mother.
become blind.
What?
Yeah. The mother won't suffer.
Okay. There are two things here, and I have conflated them. So I'm going to try and make some order here, okay? Rubella is a danger to the fetus. And it is possible, because Rabbi Weinberg's starting point is that there's no prohibition on killing a fetus, to extend the idea of, let me be very careful about this since we're on this topic now. He can extend the idea of threat to the mother's life even to mental distress caused by the fact that she's giving birth to a fetus that is damaged, okay, because she contracted a disease and didn't abort. That is what Rabbi Weinberg speaks to. So he's extending the parameters of therapeutic abortion way beyond a direct threat to the life of the mother, saying that it will also cover any threat to the mother's mental welfare, psychological health, perhaps fear and trepidation of dealing with a damaged child. Okay? Now, he finds a precedent in the 17th century in Rabbi Yaakov Emdin, who says it is permitted to abort a mamzer fetus. Okay? A mamzer fetus. Caused or brought about by the mother's adultery, which is quite a remarkable psak, because it means that the mother was at fault. She committed adultery. She now is carrying a fetus that is basically a mamzer, and there's no direct threat to her life at all. What there is a direct threat to, or indirect threat, if you like, is to her mental welfare. The tshuva that Rabbi Emden deals with is the mother who comes to the rabbi, bangs her head against the wall until the blood flows, and says, Rabbi, Rabbi, I cannot face the consequences of giving birth to a mamzer. It's my guilt, and every time I see him, I will remember my sin, and I want to do tshuva, and just spare me from the terrible guilt and psychological damage caused by the fact that I brought this mamzer into the world. And Rabbi Emden says this is called great need, and halakhically speaking, you can do it. Again, because in halakha, we're looking for a mitzvah or an isur in the Torah that says you may not kill a fetus, we will not find one. On the contrary, what will we find? When does the Torah relate to the killing of a fetus? In which case? Which case? I'll give you a clue. Parashat Mishpatim. וכי ינצחו אנשים ונגפו אישה הרה ויצאו ילדיה, אם לא יהיה אסון okay? דמי ולדות. If a woman loses
that's 3 minutes.
The woman loses a fetus because there's a brawl and she's hit by a man, okay? He causes the death of the fetus. He pays demei vladot, compensation for the loss of offspring to the husband. We don't know who the father is, to the husband. In other words, biblically speaking, killing a fetus may very well be a tort and not a crime. Nizikin and not pelilin. And that's the starting point. And we know that the reason why you kill a fetus which is directly threatening the mother's life, Shmuley, the fetus is blocked in the birth canal, okay? And in the old days, the only thing they could do was destroy the fetus. Can you do
Sophic and Vadai? I mean, the mother's definitely alive, and the child you don't know.
Because it says the ubar is lav nefeshu. So it has an inferior status, which may explain why in Parashat Mishpatim, Shemot Kaf Aleph, we read that if a man injures a woman when he's brawling with another man, he only has to pay monetary compensation. So Rabbi Weinberg is a little concerned and says, does this mean that there is no prohibition in halakha, that the Jewish Torah, halakha, has no issue with killing a fetus? So he says that can't be. Because life is so important to the Torah as a whole, we can say that Ratzon Hashem says, yes, you may not carry out a non-therapeutic abortion. Okay? Now, I'm just going to say one other thing. Rabbi Meir ben Sion Chai Uziel, the Sephardic chief rabbi at the time of Rav Kook, his Mishpatei Uziel had a tshuva about a woman who was taking a drug to save her hearing, not going deaf. She lost her hearing in one ear, and her hearing was kept in the other ear because she was on a lifetime drug. She became pregnant, and that drug threatened the life of her fetus. Can she take the drug to save her hearing, knowing that at the same time she will kill the fetus in her womb? And again, Rabbi Uziel says, yes, she may. He extends the parameters of danger to the life of the mother to any health issue and the indignity of becoming deaf. And those are the issues I conflated, but we'll clear them all up later on in the course if we get there, okay? We're still a long way away from the 20th century. But I want you to focus on the idea of Ratzon Hashem. In other words, you take a cluster of mitzvot, pikuach nefesh, the mitzvah to provide healing. All those things we do, we make going to the doctor a positive commandment. We break Shabbat in order to get you to the hospital. Would the Torah not treat the life of a fetus with respect and not condemn abortion simply for the sake of going to Switzerland and doing a nice slalom on the ski slope unencumbered by a fetus, okay? So he says there is a concept of Ratzon Hashem, but that concept only fills in gaps. In other words, I can jack up the moral standing of the halakha and say, yes, we Jews who are observant of halakha do condemn an abortion not done to save the life of the mother or serious damage to her health. There is something in the Jewish religion that says do not. But what it is very slippery. The same thing with parading naked and cannibalism. And as part of his tshuva, in Chelik Gimel, Kuf Kaf Aleph, I think, on abortion, in 38, Rabbi Weinberg says the same thing with cannibalism. Can you eat human flesh? He says, like Rabbi Glasner, not citing him, says that there's no prohibition on eating human flesh, but heaven forfend any Orthodox observant halakhic Jew who says it's okay for me to eat a corpse, a human corpse, because that puts you beyond the pale. And if we think about Dinei Avilut and Dinei Kvura and all the things we do not to be Tamei Met, if we take clusters of laws, we get to some meta halakhic principle. But instead of calling it natural law or what universal law says is beyond the pale, it's Ratzon Hashem. And Rabbi Asher Weiss uses the same phrase to explain why there are certain things that we Orthodox halakhic Jews will not do, even though there's no actual black letter law, specific prohibition in the Shulchan Aruch. So, what does everybody think of that?
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Is there a valid psak on, say, recently a hostage woman that was impregnated by one of these Hamas people?
Yes.
And pregnant.
There is, in any case of rape, there is a permission in halakha to abort. Okay?
Okay.
Again, because of it's very much like Rabbi Emden's mamzer fetus. In fact, it's a kal vachomer. If you got yourself pregnant by your own will and volition, because you had an affair and you're a married woman, and you can abort for the sake of the psychological damage you might have by giving birth to a mamzer, kal vachomer, you were raped. And that child is a child of rape. The psychological damage is immense. Certainly. Okay? No question about that at all. But have I made Rabbi Glasner clear? Very, extremely rare. You won't find this, I think, anywhere else. Okay? I'd be happy if somebody came along and could give me a black on white such a source. Okay? The only one I found, and it's in the Dor Revi'i. Look at the Peticha to Dor Revi'i, and I can, if anybody's interested, I can send you the actual words, okay, in his Hebrew. The rest of the book is entirely dry halakhic stuff, okay? Nothing very exciting. But this is absolutely almost beyond the pale. As I said, he was an exception in Hungarian rabbinic orthodoxy. He's a friendly with Rav Kook. He was very supportive of rationalism, and he went to Palestine in 1924. And as I said, he was sent off by over 10,000 people in the railway station in Cluj, Klausenberg, and he said, Jews, it's time to leave. And there we are. Okay. So what I want to do next is I want to have a look at what I think is a much more common way of getting around halakhic prohibitions for the sake of doing what one thinks is right in human terms. Okay? Not as dramatic, perhaps, as cannibalism, nudity, and non-therapeutic abortion, but still quite important, and it points up the importance of the role of the posek. The posek is, after all, someone who has to use halakhic sources and create solutions to real problems. Now, I see that Stephen Singer is on board. Would Stephen Singer like to read? And if he would, he needs to unmute. Otherwise, I'll go up and I'm back with Yael. So let's see. Yael Berman. Are you there?
Yes, and unmuted.
Good. Right, 32. Let's hear about Rabbi Moses Feinstein.
Rabbi Moses Feinstein, March 3rd,
slowly and clearly.
Rabbi Moses Feinstein, March 3rd, 1895 to March 23rd, 1986, was born in Uzda, Minsk Governorate in the Russian Empire.
Governorate, exactly. What we call in Russian a guberna. Minsk guberna in the Russian Empire. His father,
Rabbi David Feinstein, was the rabbi of Uzda and a great-grandson of the Vilna Gaon's brother. His mother was a descendant of Rabbi Yom Tov Lipman Heller, the Shelach HaKadosh
on the Mishnah, and the Ma'adane Yom Tov on the Rosh.
The Shelach HaKadosh and Rashi.
About him, Rabbi Yeshaya Yahu Horovitz, the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, and
Rashi.
Well, that's enough. Vilna Gaon, Tosafot Yom Tov, Shelach HaKadosh, Rashi, not bad. He studied with his father.
And late in the Yeshiva in Slutsk under Rabbi Issel Zalman Meltzer. While in Slutsk, Rabbi Pesach Pushkin, who he regarded as his mentor, took him and several other outstanding students to found a new yeshiva in Shklov. His first rabbinical appointment was in Lyuban, where he served for 16 years. Under increasing pressure from the Soviet regime, he moved with his family to New York City in January 1937, where he lived for the rest of his life. Settling on the Lower East Side, Rabbi Feinstein became the Rosh Yeshiva of Meshivat Tiferet Yerushalayim.
Mesivta Tiferet Yerushalayim. Trying to give it an authentic atmosphere. Mesivta Tiferet Yerushalayim.
He later established a branch of the yeshiva in Staten Island, headed by his son, Rabbi Reuven Feinstein. Another son, Rabbi David Feinstein, eventually succeeded his father in the Manhattan branch. Rabbi Feinstein was the president of the Union of Orthodox Rabbis of the United States and Canada and chaired the Moetzet Gedolei HaTorah of Agudat Yisrael of America from the 1960s until his death. He also took an active leadership role in Israel's Chinuch Atzmai.
Okay, which is the independent Haredi organization. Okay, so let's go to you, Robert Vassal.
Just one question. What is his connection to the Rabbi Feinstein of the Gush? No, sorry, retract. Sorry, wrong rabbi.
Wrong, you meant Rabbi Lichtenstein.
Yeah,
that's the
wrong rabbi.
They were Feinsteins and the Soloveitchiks are connected. By marriage. Yeah, but that's Lichtenstein. No Feinstein in the Gush. Let me go back to the top. Actually, Jack, can you give us the next bit, please? Rabbi Feinstein, line 9 was recognized. But you have to unmute.
Rabbi Feinstein was recognized by many as the preeminent halachic authority of his generation, ruling on the issues of Jewish law as they pertain to modern times. People around the world called upon him to answer their most complicated halachic questions. He was especially skilled at handling complicated business and labor disputes, and had a firm grasp of general commercial practice, including its secular legal aspect. He also served as the halachic authority for the Association of Orthodox Jewish Scientists, an indication of his expertise in Jewish medical ethics. On such matters, he often consulted with various scientific experts, including his son-in-law, Rav Moshe David Tender, a professor of biology, who served as a Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University. As one of the preeminent leaders of American Orthodoxy, Rabbi Feinstein issued opinions that clearly distanced his community from conservative and reform Judaism. By contrast, he faced intense opposition from more conservative and especially Hasidic rabbinic circles and several controversial decisions, such as his rulings on artificial insemination and the Mechitza.
Rabbi Feinstein, as I said, to do justice to him in a few lines, little difficult, but I tried. One of his decisions in the late 50s was to allow Orthodox married Jewish women to go to a fertility clinic in New York and be artificially inseminated by donor sperm. I will go into that tshuva later on, but he came under fierce attack from all over, especially by the Satmar Rebbe, Reb Yoel Teitelbaum, okay, and many others, to the extent that Rabbi Amsel, who was the editor of the rabbinic journal, Orthodox journal Hapardes, he said, look, Rabbi Feinstein has this tremendous capacity to be lenient. So if he writes that something is osser, you can be sure that it really is osser, because if there had been any way of finding a heter, he would have found one. But nevertheless, okay, and the mechitza too, the minimum of 3 feet is something that came under heavy attack. Even while, okay, Shmuley, you're next down the line on my screen. Even while, line 21.
Even while disagreeing with his specific rulings, however, his detractors still considered him a leading interpreter of Jewish law.
Detractors are his critics. He was still respected as a leading posek. And that's quite remarkable, you know, in our age, in the 20th century. 21st.
The first volume of his Responsa Igros Moshe was published in 1959. Succeeding volumes brought the number of his published Responsa to 1883, and over 200 more are found in his Talmudic commentary Divrot Moshe. His drashot on the Parsha were published in Darash Moshe. His funeral in Jerusalem was attended by 250,000 people, and he's buried on Har Menuchot Nev of Issa Zalman Meltzer. Some of his early works, including a commentary on the Jerusalem Talmud, were lost in communist Russia. Others were preserved in manuscript form, and the Feinstein Foundation is currently preparing these for publication.
So Rabbi Feinstein is going to tell us about the following question. Can a blind person come into shul with his guide dog? The interesting thing we're going to do is we're going to compare Rabbi Feinstein's tshuva to that of Rabbi Breish. And we're going to see there are 2 different answers. And we're going to find out why. And then I'm going to leave you with a question of actually, who is the blind man in the story of a blind person's guide dog in shul? But that'll have to wait until next week. And what I will say is that next week is the last shiur we'll have in this series before I go to the States. So we'll then take a break and we will resume on the 11th of March. I will write all of this down. But what I want to do next week is after I've done with the guide dogs and Rabbi Breish and Rabbi Feinstein, and again, dignity as a universal concept, I want to have a look at the Ramaz, interesting tshuva on stam yain, regular wine, not supervised wine. Can you drink it or not? All of that and more next Wednesday evening, same time, same place. And this has been recorded, and we look forward to a healthy and successful week for all of us. In the meantime, I will bid everybody a very good evening, Erev Tov, Bonsoir, a gute Nacht, and all the very best. Remember, let's see, I don't know, when is Nittelnacht? It's tonight or tomorrow?
Tonight.
Now,
right, it's tonight. But
in 2 hours' time here.
It's right, it's not yet midnight, so we haven't learned on Nittelnacht. We'll be fine. We can resume again next week. Okay, everybody, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bruchim to you.